Okay, welcome everyone. This is Future Flavors of Sound 2022. I am Herleen. I am one of the class representatives for the MSc Sound Design program, particularly interested in game audio. So it made sense for me to host the stream. And we have Lisa Devon and Bjorn Jacobson in the stream today. I'm a big fan of both of their works, and we had a chance to interact with Lisa earlier for our interactive sound environments course, and I've heard Bjorn's work and followed the YouTube videos forever now. So I'm really excited to have the two of you. Now, I would like the two of you to introduce yourself, starting with Lisa, if that's okay.
Sure. Yes, so my name is Lisa. I'm from California originally, where I used to work in film and post-production, doing sound for various studios in San Francisco. And then I moved to Edinburgh and did the same course that you all are doing to get into game audio. And after that, I started working for a company called Media Molecule on a PlayStation game called Dreams. And here I'm kind of like all of the people on the audio team are very full, like we do everything. So we do music, sound effects, recordings, voiceover, editing, everything. So yeah, my work is very, every day is very interesting. So yeah, very, very excited to check out your guys' work and stuff.
Right. That's really cool. I think most of us are interested in the creative and both technical side of game audio and how that kind of intersects. So that's really good to hear. And now if we could hear from Bjorn.
Yeah, hi. My name is Bjorn. I worked in the game industry for quite a long time. I do a couple of short films and a couple of commercials every year, but primarily I work in video games. Worked on some really big ones, some really small ones, and it's been sort of fun most of the time. My first real job was with EVE Online, and now I've worked on the latest Settlers, the latest Assassin's Creed, Cyberpunk 2077, and Hitman, a bunch of others. The Cycle. Yeah. It's fun, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, really cool projects, and Dark is one of my favorite projects from you. So yeah. Just to give everyone a brief about how we'll be continuing the stream, we have 7 submissions. When we stream the video, we will invite the person and spotlight them, so the panelists can ask them any questions that they might have, or the people who've submitted their work can ask any questions they might have to the panelists. And I would say that's everything on my list. So we can now start with the first submission, which is an interactive sound demo reel from Sinclair.
This is your Queen Gloriba, yes, the glorious Queen of Buds. You know we have a hive mind, so you'll be hearing from me. Go scout out the human garden.
Alright, welcome to my interactive sound demo reel made with Unity and Wise at the Edinburgh College of Art. Enjoy.
Don't panic. Find something to stop that machine. A comrade down. Go scout. flies.
Father. You're just like your father.
Awesome. I'm sorry, we'll have to cut it off there because we've kept 3 minutes as the streaming time. So we have enough time for discussion. Now, I would like to invite Sinclair into the spotlight, and maybe we can start with Bjorn and hear what you think about the work.
I like the sort of psychedelic vibe you get from going in and out of the universe and going in and out of the tunnel and in the garden, and the overseer type voice. The voice is probably the best part of it. Like that really fits into that this is a psychedelic or weird type world. There is a number of things that I think from experience would have been better differently, like footsteps could have been louder or more detailed and a couple of things. But I also totally acknowledge that that might not come supernatural as into how Wise and Unity behaves when dealing with that sort of thing. But in general, as it is with many other of, let's say, student project games, they're so small and they become more of a showcase of what can be done with audio, what can be done with a universe, rather than actually being a game. So in this case, I like the experience of just witnessing that you can wander around and have a good time in the world, rather than actually being able to play it, not trying to create a game that it can't live up to anyway.
Right. Thank you. And now if we could hear from Lisa.
Yeah, I really liked it. I thought, if I remember correctly, doing this project myself, I think this was a really clever way of addressing the brief of the project. Making yourself a bug and kind of like blowing up all of the props and stuff in the space was really quite a clever, I think, response to the brief of the project. I agree that the voice was really, really cool. Another note about the voice, though, I think when you introduce yourself as like, this is my sound reel and stuff, that came as a bit of a, unexpected thing, because I was expecting that to be a part of the world. So I thought that narration somehow tied into the game until I realized that it was, you introducing your project. So I'd probably recommend putting that at the very beginning if you're going to have a little narration introducing it, rather than like a few seconds later. But I really love the little sound design sequence that happens when you get killed and that kind of like pop back into the little tunnel. That was really cool. I think I find with this one and also a few of the other ones that I listened to, there's a little bit of a lack of kind of hearing the space, the environment. Like I kind of felt like I wanted the ambience and like the sound of the world to be a little bit more obvious. I thought the footsteps were quite subtle, and I'm a big like stickler about footsteps. I always get really like annoyed when I'm playing a big RPG and the footsteps don't sound right. It's the sound that you hear the most. So I feel like sound designers are always like going on and on about footsteps, which is rightfully so. But otherwise, yeah, I thought this was a really interesting one. I think, I guess my one last thought is that the music, sometimes I wasn't sure where that fit in with the gameplay. Like, I was sort of, I guess playing it myself, it would probably make a bit more sense, but listening to it, I wasn't sure how the kind of drums and stuff had to do with like the lawnmower. Like maybe if you got closer to it, the drums would come in. I wasn't sure how that actually worked in game, but I think it's one of those things you have to just experience by playing yourself. But that was the only kind of disjointed thing that I felt. But yeah, great work.
Thank you. So actually what happened was that I had like major sort of technical issues just before handing it in, and it like threw stuff off so bad, but I managed to get it sorted. I'm really happy with like getting that sorted in the end. But I guess for me, what I was trying to do in the first reel is give a sense of scale. So like, how would you recommend going about portraying that sense of scale through sound? Like having the footsteps sort of loud, but yet sort of delicate and small, like a bug, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I did kind of think, what would a bug actually hear? I mean, not literally, because there's no way we can actually really measure that. But I think there is like an element of humor in that one with the narration and stuff. So it felt like you could almost like capitalize on that humor aspect a little bit more and make the sound of like the scale of things almost like comically large or somehow like kind of unrealistic, like hyper realistic or unrealistically large. But I think you did that with the lawnmower, and maybe you could have kind of taken that concept and tried it with other things around in the environment. But yeah, I don't know if Bjorn has any ideas on that too.
I guess maybe if you're a bug like that, then everything becomes really big and dangerous. Maybe it could have had an excessive amount of low end once it got really close or something. But I think it works pretty well as a bug, that this world is that you're tiny, your steps are tiny and so on. But I don't think it's very well communicated that you're a bug over a tiny human.
Okay.
As such, because I don't know, you never see yourself, so that is depends on the premise. Because if you knew beforehand, then maybe some of the things would make a different sense, or be easier to explain with audio if something was visually explained previously, or vice versa.
I think something that like Boom Library always does, and I use them as an example sometimes, to try and emulate with my own sound design, but like with their little insect stuff, they take a lot of like recordings of little mechanical things or like little plastic toys and stuff, and then they just speed them up so much you get this kind of like jittery, clicky kind of like thing. And that, I guess a lot of those can sound a little bit too sci-fi, so I'm not sure if that's really the vibe you're going for, but you could experiment with taking like a really rhythmic sound and just like time stretching the shit out of it, making it really fast.
Yeah.
And kind of making like the more insecty bits a bit more obvious in that way.
Sure.
Yeah, because I guess the sound of the bug itself isn't the forefront of the experience, so, but maybe you could make that a bit more. Yeah.
Awesome. We have 2 more minutes, so if you have any final thoughts, we can hear that now, and then we can move on to the second submission.
Maybe I would have liked, let's say, if the voice communicating stuff, she has the same type of voice. Well, okay, this is not feedback, this is a suggestion, but more like she has the same voice, the same type of voice, regardless of whether you're inside, the tube peering into the world or wherever you are, as much as if you're out in the open and so on. Maybe it would have been real cool if she was like different when you're in the tunnel or similar. Yeah,
it felt like you could have experimented with filters a bit more, like we kind of can see a lot of like emulations of how like bugs and bees see things with all their little like telescopic vision and whatnot, but how could that maybe be like translated into sound? Like, yeah, obviously the tunnel would be a really good opportunity to have like a kind of spring or tube like filter, or like maybe when you're going under the lawnmower, it kind of everything gets a little bit hollow sounding, or like kind of trying to like experiment with acoustic sort of spaces and stuff, and magnifying those because you're so small and everything's so huge. That could be an interesting approach.
Awesome. Thanks for the great feedback. And now we can move on to the second submission, which is called Nightmare Town. And it's from Yulin, who is sadly not here. But we would still love to hear your feedback for the work. And now we can hear it. Awesome. Thanks for your submission, Yulin. And now if we can start with Lisa and just hear what you think about the project.
Yeah, so cool environment. That was very fun. I love the drone. That was very very pretty and sounds good. And it felt like they really paid attention to details. Like every sound was kind of accounted for and didn't feel like there were any missing bits. I think the first thing that came to me is, of course, related to footsteps. I think the cycle was a bit too short. Needed a bit more variation, whether that is, more sound files and also just a bit more randomization with them, because it felt like after 2 footsteps, I already heard the cycle repeating. And since that is the sound that you hear the most, I think it's worth spending like a really good amount of time on. And I have a few games that come to mind that I think do like footsteps so well. One of them, I think my favorite footstep example in a game is God of War. Like, oh my God, those footsteps are just so good. But just play that game for the footsteps alone if you haven't. The remastered one, I should say. But yeah, so that one was a big one. I felt like there was a few bugs related to footsteps, like they were playing while the player was jumping. They weren't there weren't any surface types as far as I could tell. And then yeah, for the creatures, I loved the creativity that they put into the creature sound design. The acting was really fun. But again, I felt like the loop cycle was too short, so I could hear the dialogue being repeated really quickly and kind of over and over again. And especially I think when you have something that's so like such a long sort of thing, it maybe just give it a bit more space. Like the creatures don't have to be vocalizing 100% of the time. They can vocalize, have some silence, and then vocalize again. Maybe you can make that the time between each iteration a little bit short, a little bit more random. I felt like the 3D positioning was a bit off. I wasn't sure where things were coming from. And especially at the end, there was like this knocking sound effect, and I wasn't sure what that was supposed to be, where it was coming from, and where it fit in with the world. And I think that relates kind of to my next point, which is that there is a kind of lack of spatial processing. So it felt like there wasn't a lot of there was a lot of creative sort of reverb on the creatures, but not that kind of matched the space. So some things it felt like they were really close when they actually weren't that close, and vice versa. Some things felt like they were really far away, but then they were actually quite physically close. So I think looking at the kind of spatial processing and the 3D position of things could really help them fit a bit better in the environment. And then this is just like a subjective one, but I get a little bit like when tonal sound effects aren't matched to the music. So there's this like kind of pretty drone that had a very clear like key and scale to it, and then the sound effects were like in something completely different, and they didn't feel like they fit together at all. So like I think if you're going to use musical sound effects, see how they fit in with the actual music as well. Yeah, so yeah, those are my thoughts.
That's some great feedback. Thank you.
One thing that there is to say about this, except for all the stuff that Lisa already pointed out, that the footsteps and so on, when your footsteps are as loud as this and so crisp, like clearly close mic'd like that, making them a very important part of moving around, then you cannot have two variations. That if they have been tiny little clicks or something like that, then it's a different thing. But once they are a big part of the entire flavor that we're supposed to absorb, then variation is key. Could be pitch changes, could be lots of things, but also variations in types of how many assets are used. I usually just refer to it as if you notice that something is repeating or it gets annoying, then it needs to be resolved, because if it's annoying to us, it's annoying to everybody else, even if they don't think about it. I do really appreciate, because I know how little time there is to create a project like this, enjoy the individual sounds of many of the creatures and what is going on. The implementation of them, unfortunately, is, I wouldn't call it poor, but that's where it becomes messy. I mean, the sounds of every monster and everything that is going on in this project alone would be, the experience of all these individual sounds would be greatly increased by having much more controlled attenuation and behavior in the physical world over changing the sounds or altering them. But I do agree with what Lisa says about the musical elements and UI elements, like picking up the healing potion or whatever kind of potion it is, that sort of like stands out of the world. It's one thing that comes with experience is as well, that when you establish a universe that your game is supposed to be in, let's say this is a fantasy game, then you have this little niche that you establish, then you cannot leave this niche. You cannot have something that suddenly sounds super realistic if your game is Mickey Mouse, or vice versa. If your game is Mickey Mouse, you can't have super realistic sounds that are straight up in your face. So the picking up of the healing potion, that sound, I would say, is the one sound that I would scrap and revise. Yet all the other sounds would be the sounds where I would focus on the implementation part and solving the projects as a whole. Because like with the previous project, we cannot point fingers at the game design because we know how little time is going into this and how much you might not be a game designer when you're designing this. But I think with practice on implementation, this could be fair. I mean, the sounds are great and so on. But the thing with the footsteps is vital to making this not annoying, but also it's the same footstep regardless of what material you're stepping on inside a house or if you're out in the open, which is also rather important since it's very clear that you're changing the material. And since the footstep is as loud and crisp as it is, it becomes extremely apparent that this is not changing. So either the footsteps would have to be muted or like very subtle, or the amount of assets would have to be changed in that regard. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember watching one of your videos where you mentioned that we end up spending too much time on like special sounds that happen once in a game, and we tend to forget sounds that happen all the time. Those are like footsteps, and you're gonna hear it. Like, doesn't matter if it's the boss fight or you just started. So it's really like it makes sense for those sounds to be really on point and make sure they're not becoming annoying. And
yes, exactly. I mean, that particular video that you must have watched is where we discuss how do we make Hitman not boring, or how do we not break the immersive part of Hitman? Start counting what sound do you hear the most, and that is footsteps and doors opening. So hence those two types of sounds must actually be the ones that is the most detailed, most designed, most crisp, so that they never become boring because you hear them all the time. A gunshot can be, if you hear one gunshot per time you play the game, then that gunshot could technically be the same over and over and over.
Yeah.
Whereas if the same door sound plays every 2 seconds, then it just I quit games because of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Lisa, are you going to add something to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think just like when we're talking about like world building and stuff, and it's a little bit unfair for me to quote Nintendo right now, but I feel like Nintendo does like the most amazing freaking job at that. And I feel like I would love to sit down with Animal Crossing one day and just do like a super hyper analysis of the UI and how it fits like so perfectly with the world and how everything is like so intentional. And I think there's an old interview like from decade ago with the guy, the lead sound designer of Skyrim, and how he basically gave himself like a list of keywords that was like related to the world of Skyrim. And he was like, every sound that I make has to be defined somehow with these keywords, or it has to fit within the scope of these. I think that could be like an interesting limitation or restraint to give yourself when you're trying to create stuff that fits together in a world. Yeah.
That's really cool. Since Yulin is not here, maybe I can ask a question on their behalf. And that's like, I've always been curious about big teams, and when you're working with other sound designers, and like you have 5 sound designers and all these sounds now have to go and like exist in the same game. What is your approach there to make sure that everyone's on the same line, and like how does that work for the two of you?
In that case, Skyrim is a really bad example. That is one guy. But yeah, when it comes to working in teams, the way it usually functions on my team here is that there is straight up audio direction on how we want stuff to sound. And then we also believe in that the sound designers will deliver content within that sort of framework that we have provided. And then we supervise and go through it together afterwards, so that it's not a personal thing. If I, as a supervisor or another audio director, comes in and says, no, I want it to be more beefy or something like that, it's not a personal attack to your sound. It's quite important to understand that you work together, and the audio director trusts the sound designers, and the sound designers don't feel like molested by the director, because I've worked on projects like that too, and it becomes a nightmare. But everybody provides their little thing, and everybody understands that no sound is too small for the big experience. Like if you're told to do all the footsteps, I know a lot of sound designers who are like, oh, I don't want to design footsteps. But those footsteps, if they interact correctly with the rest of the world, they become like a majority of the experience. So everybody's kind of like in the same boat. Everybody wants the same quality product in the end.
That's really cool. We have 1 minute left. So if you have any final thoughts for this project, otherwise we can move on.
Yeah, I can answer that question a little bit too. Here we tend to work on projects in isolation because our audio team is incredibly small.
Mhm.
But also same, like if there is going to be more than one audio person on a project, there's a direction, and then there's the expectation that we follow that direction. And usually it ends up being that there's one audio person on a project, and then depending on like scope or release deadlines, et cetera, then another audio person will jump on towards the end of a project. To help out, and then basically whoever's there first kind of determines the direction of it.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you. Now we can move on to the next submission, which is called Cave Runner by Samuel.
I can travel with you no farther, young adventurer. I must return to the forest. You must carry on with the rest of the journey by yourself. Find the lost Saint Temple. It is essential to the people. You must find your way through the cave. Remember, darkness dwells in the underworld. You must move fast. Good luck, young adventurer. Move along. Move along.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your submission, Samuel. And now if we can spotlight the panelists and Samuel. And can we start with Bjorn?
Sure. This is really good work. There's a number of things where I really like the details. The fact that you have different reverberation for areas and so on, that's a huge step, because that really changes the flavor of what's going on. You get the idea that it's a bigger or confined space and so on. The monster sounds are also fine, but one of the things that really comes to mind, that's the way this is being presented, that voice acting is really hard if you're not a voice actor, a professional one. Not that that it doesn't, let's say, adds flavor or comes through as weak or bad or anything like that, but it's really hard to nail voice acting if you do it yourself, or if it's someone who's not familiar with voice acting who does it. And that, I'm saying that because that happens as the very first thing in the game, and you're jumping around, you hear the footsteps and so on. And the first thing that I notice about the footsteps when you're just walking up and down the staircase is that, oh no, this will be a project where the steps will be super monotonous or something like that, which they are not once you start moving, but because of the way it's presented, it comes through as being, why is it the way it is? A little later in the game, where you have seen the bigger monster, you come across the little spider and so on, I started to notice that there is hardly any difference in the footsteps regardless of the player's speed. So sometimes it can feel like the player's moving extremely fast, but it's the same footstep as if the player was moving really slow. Which is just, okay, that's nitpicking, but that's the thing that came to mind. There's a lot of details in the steps. It's very crisp. It's very, like, it's recorded very close to the source, which means that the footsteps are extremely detailed, but also very much in your face as you're playing the game. So details in those will start to come to mind, will be easier to notice as you're moving about. The little details of stuff that is like little rocks that's falling down, depending on where you're walking and so on, that's a really nice little thing. And overall, I think that this is nice work, because it also has this clearly an understanding of how things sound when you're indoor, when you're outdoor, smaller and bigger spaces, understanding of distances for various sounds, especially when you're not looking at the monster and it growls. But one thing that could have been done with filtering is that, since the footsteps are as loud as they are, those could have been lower so that they're not clogging up the entire sound space all the time. But one really smart way of doing that is to have like almost no low end in your footsteps, and almost no high end either, because it really sounds like that my ear is right next to where this footstep is being taken, yet the monster right next to me is almost at a lower volume. Even though the volume might be higher, the human perception of proximity effect starts to work, so that it constantly sounds like I'm listening to my steps rather than the world around me. And yeah, but it's really nice work. I really enjoyed listening to In and Out of the Cave and the monsters. Those are fun.
Thank you so much for that. If we can hear from Lisa, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I also really liked it. I mentioned up the top the cave and the monsters as well. I thought those were really, really well done. Felt like, again, the details were all accounted for, so didn't feel like there was any holes or gaps, missing stuff. So definitely could see the care that was put into it. I like that you addressed the surface types. That was really good. I kind of noticed, again, that the footstep cycle was a bit too short for me, so I found that they were getting repetitive really quickly again. I think that I did notice that there was some pitch variation, but it almost felt like a bit too much pitch variation. So like sometimes you could really hear that there was like a super deep one and then like a really high one afterwards. And I think maybe sound designers ourselves are a little bit more attuned to those things because we've done that stuff ourselves. But yeah, I could look at maybe looking at different ways of adding variation aside from pitch. I think one of my biggest things that critiques is that I noticed there was a kind of a fidelity mismatch. So there would be some sort of higher fidelity things that were mixed with lower fidelity things. So like the birds, for example, felt quite low fidelity, but then the drone and the ambience felt like a little bit higher. And the voiceover obviously was recorded with modern equipment and stuff. So I think, and even between surface types with the footsteps as well too. Like I felt like the rock footsteps sounded like they were a little bit higher sample rate, for example, than like the wooden ones. And I think that this is kind of a note about using like libraries in general, is like, think about when you're using different libraries or libraries from different sources, think about the year that those things were recorded. Because, you know, for example, I think in my personal collection, I've got some like Hanna-Barbera stuff. This is like an extreme example, but I've got some like Hanna-Barbera stuff from like the 50s. And obviously that stuff sounds like totally different quality than like some cartoon things that were recorded in the last 10 years. So sometimes I find that when you have like a large library, sound effects library with lots of different sources, think about whether or not the fidelity match is going to work. I thought that the whoosh for ducking and jumping was a little bit over designed. Like I don't think you need so much about like when you duck, because that doesn't really happen, you know, in real life. But it's cool that you thought about that. It's cool that you thought about the actual motion and like whether it needed a sound. I think like the attention to detail is really good. I loved all the little ambient touches in the cave, like little creaking effects and the drips and all that stuff was really satisfying. And I felt like the dragon felt sufficiently beefy. It was like big, and you could feel that it was a big scary monster. And then I put here that it could have been fun to like morph the roars a little bit to make them sound a bit less human. So if you have any good like kind of like morphing plugins, like I love the one that's just called Morph by Synaptic, I think they're called. And it's like a spectral processor where you feed it two sources and sidechain it, and then you can kind of like use this little graph to use like the envelope of one to morph another. It's really, really fun. You could try like a trial of that. I don't know if Edinburgh would get a copy of it, but it's really, yeah, there you go. Yeah, thanks, Jack. Awesome plugin for monster sounds and just actually any kind of textural sounds. Like I really love using Morph I have the source that has the kind of, you know, envelope that I like maybe that's a recording of myself roaring, and then I pitch shifted it down, and then I take something super textural, like a violin bow against some string or like some sort of like really, yeah, rhythmic textural sound, and morphing the two of them and seeing what you get. It's really fun. And I love the spiders. Spiders were great. Good work.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing your feedback and all the nice tricks. We have about 3 minutes before we're going to break for 5 minutes. So any final thoughts, any questions, either from the panelist or from Samuel, then please go ahead.
Yeah, I want to thank you guys for the awesome suggestions. And in terms of mixing, I definitely need a lot of work in terms of balancing, especially like player experience wise, because I never really like put time into this project. But the starting with the footstep walking around was trying to show the like the wizard's trying to hush you away, right? So if you stay around, I was trying to design it like a sound game mechanic. If you stay around, he will like just hush you and like try to like shoo you to go and stuff. But the footstep needs a lot of work for sure. But it's definitely great suggestions in terms of especially with sound files. I definitely didn't get a lot of time to record more sound files for the footsteps. Also for like different materials, but like if maybe like more sound files inside the cycle would help a little bit. Definitely like great suggestion. I'm gonna take some good advice for my next kind of project as well. So I'm kind of doing that like a similar project. It's kind of like a 3D environment, sound immersive. That's one of the keywords I'm looking for. Like I'm trying to build an immersive player experience. Yeah, that's all. Thank you guys.
Out of curiosity, are you all building your own environments in 3D as well? Or are you working with game design students?
Oh no, I built this one by myself using like my existing Unity assets I bought, but like okay. I have to like piece the modules together. But like I was trying to figuring out how to work sound with the animation and everything. It was kind of fun, but like it took a lot of time for sure.
Yeah, because I think that's a challenge with this project with interactive sound environments in particular, is like making sure you don't spend too much time on the visuals, because that is like obviously not our, job. But if you're using assets and stuff, that's good.
I can
but
barely write stuff myself.
Yeah.
I had to look up like every step I like try to do, like how do I make this thing disappear? I go to the Google or I go to school materials, or like I had to do it every time and try to write a C# script. So
Yeah, and like all that time is taking away from your sound design work too, which is worth considering.
That's for sure.
Yeah. With most of the submissions, I think they're either like individual projects that people have developed themselves, or it's just with another person who makes like 3D models and then just like working with them to create like a small game. So we've reached the end of the 15-minute slot. Now we're going to break for 5 minutes and then start again at 4:52. So I'll see you guys in 5 minutes. I guess we can start now, if that's okay. Awesome. We'll just wait for Beyond to join back in, and then we can have a listen to Self-Reliance by Andrew Ramsey.
Oh, I'm here.
Awesome. Okay. So yeah, now we're listening to Self-Reliance by Andrew Ramsey.
Rather than the blue beard.
Your sister will have wished it was her, with such fine things.
My old knees aren't much for dancing these days.
Pense donc à la vie que nous aurions pu mener.
We don't have much time. No, we need to keep looking.
Je t'avais prévenu de ne pas entrer dans cette salle, et nous bouillons. Je te donne une dernière chance pour prier.
He's gonna come see. This room is empty.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your submission, Andrew. I know Andrew had some problems with building the game in Unreal, so that's why Andrew had to take a screen grab off the session. But yeah, it would be lovely to start with Lisa and hear what you have to say.
I feel like I'm developing a pattern of talking about footsteps ad infinitum. So sorry about talking about footsteps again. But I kind of expected this character, just based on the way that she looks and what she's wearing, to have slightly more like delicate footsteps. And I also felt that they were very loud and just like I guess a bit heavy sounding. I think I have the same critique as the other ones about like the cycle being really short and repetitive as well. But I really liked the way you treated each room. I thought it was really cool to see how like it kind of started in this like lighthearted, almost like festival chamber music sort of thing, and then went to this kind of darker place. I thought that maybe the actual transition between each space could have been like played with a bit more, like almost doing kind of creative, like whooshy sort of like transitions that could have added to that, like that sense of being in this nightmare almost environment. I was a bit confused by the different languages that were happening, and I wasn't sure what the purpose of that necessarily was. I liked the acting of the French. That was pretty cool, but I wasn't sure what the sort of like narrative or like intention of that was. So it would be cool. Maybe, I mean, I'm sure you're still developing this project and stuff, and maybe that will make more sense later, but the processing on the voice, it was, I think, a little bit heavy considering that voice is also giving you directions. So kind of from an almost like an accessibility point of view, like if you're needing to hear and understand what she's saying in order to like progress, it might be better to like kind of just hold back a little bit on the processing, on the delays and stuff. Unless, it's not necessarily like if that voice isn't crucial to progressing in the game, then then disregard that bit of feedback. But let's see, I really liked the tension building elements, the kind of string harmonics, they kind of come and go. I like that you gave the music some space. It wasn't like incessant music. I think that's a really good strategy. And yeah, the voiceover jump, the super loud voice that kind of gave everyone a jump scare, that I wrote that down too as being loud. I think that the mix could be probably looked at a little bit. Dynamics processing and stuff would be handy. But yeah, good job.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Is it an aesthetic choice that you only hear like one footstep per second, or is that simply because it just triggers from animation and that was a problem later? Or like, okay, because I actually kind of like it that the way the whole universe is structured, like Princess Fairy Tale on acid in a horror setting. That's nice. But the first couple of times I watched the video beforehand on all this, I was a little bothered by the footstep, but then later came to actually really enjoy it because it actually fits the setting, I think. I mean, sure, there's a lot of mixing things and so on, but the fact that it changes per material and the way that the princess actually moves, there isn't any like crazy animations going on. It's more like one. It's almost like a sphere that's just moving in this world. But then I think that the voicing and the music, especially the music in the beginning, is really nice. But also, as we've talked about in some of the previous examples, then when you pick up the crystals, sound like it does actually fit this universe, the little dings that seems to fit with the music and the way the world is structured. So that in itself makes this experience pretty good. I mean, if of course, from a game design perspective and so on, for anyone to want to play the game, of course, there would have to be probably more to it as a game. But I think as a sound design thing, where kind of like, what was that? The Hideo Kojima walking down the hallway thing. that sort of game where this is scary. I felt there was a unity between all the components. The music fits, the footsteps fits, and everything is, if something is weird or unrealistic, it still fits the setting because graphics are also like that. And yeah, maybe it would be cool with a different animation for when the princess moves and different footsteps, but I also kind of like it that it is the way it is, like this really heavy, very heavy princess. Yeah, did you compose the music yourself? No, okay. But the music is a good choice. It really fits the universe in the beginning. Really feels like Cinderella at some I don't know, party that sort of goes beyond what you wanted it to be. Yeah, I think this is nice work, really.
Thank you. Yeah, the piece is The Grand Waltz by Francisco Tarrega, and it's known for being like the Nokia theme song, actually.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm glad you feel like things fit in the world, and I definitely was kind of having problems with like the amount of mechanics versus like what I was trying to do, because I was doing this in collaboration with a game designer. So like I was handed this game, and then I was like, okay, how can I add sound to like kind of fit this story of like, it's like the Bluebeard folktale, which is like where the French comes in, because it's like a French myth kind of thing, where like he's captured this person and like is keeping them in their house and is going to murder her, because like when the jump scare happens, it's like the room in the story where like she finds all the other dead wives, basically. So I was like trying to add these like kind of trying to figure out how can I tell this story in like a very like simple way throughout sound. So I think especially like building tension, I think maybe adding more like effects between the rooms could have definitely helped with that a lot. So yeah, there's a lot and mixing is just a whole thing.
Yeah, we have 4 more minutes. So any final thoughts? Any questions? Maybe not.
No, I think it's good work. I mean, some of the, let's say, if we were to comment on, we would have liked more variations on footsteps or different sounds when opening doors or similar to that. That would be, I feel, unfair, because the way the game is designed and the way like I guess nobody is like super advanced in Unreal or Unity, and that has to be learned as well. How does the world behaves and so on? So it would be unfair to comment on that. Those things are problems. So I think the sound design of this to what it is fits really well and shows a great understanding of a certain aspect of aesthetics and how to present the world that, I don't know if it's the world that you wanted to present, but it's the world that I perceive. I feel that this fits very well together. So I think it's well done.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much.
Oh, no worries.
Okay, now I'm not on mute. Thanks for the submission, Andrew. Now we have In Your Dreams by Maria. We're going to listen to the piece and then we'll invite Maria and discuss the work with her.
Where am I? Why can I hear them but not see them? Wait, am I dreaming? I think if I open that door, then this dream would end. must be a key to open that door. Wait, am I dreaming? I don't think I can leave.
Awesome. So that was a game that was made by Maria, and she did all the sounds for it. We will add Maria to the spotlight now, and maybe we can start with Lisa.
Hey, I love this one. It was really cool. I think you did a really great job of building tension, especially when leading to like collectible items and stuff. Like the sort of sounds that led you into the direction of them were really cool. And I like that I thought it was a really cool creative choice to mix that like kind of solo string part with that sine wavy drone thing. It was kind of like unexpected, but I thought that worked really well. I put on my headphones at the end because I noticed that I think that the mix was mono of the whole thing, which is just, I think probably when you're exporting one of those things to just check to make sure that because I remember thinking the position sounds are so nice, but if I feel like I'm not actually getting where they are positioned. So that might've just been like a little export bug. So just make sure to just check that out when doing the video for that. I love the nice subtle footsteps. Of course, gotta mention them every time. And the vocal processing was really cool. I sometimes feel like with eerie voices, we tend to like, as sound designers, use the same tricks. So we kind of use like reverse reverbs and delays and like the kind of long plate verbs. And I feel like I hear that a lot. So this is a very subjective thing, but I wonder if that voice that's kind of like telling you, oh, maybe I should go find a key. If you could experiment with different plugins to try and like get out of that kind of cliche of using the same sort of things that we always use. And like, I'm a victim, like I do that all the time too. And I find myself kind of like reaching for the same plugins or the same like processing chain to make like eerie sounding vocals. But I really liked the whispery pad and how that built up when you approached a collectible. I definitely felt like the sounds fit within the worlds. It felt like you addressed everything, like the doors and everything. I missed a bit of ambience and a bit of reverb on the doors when you're opening and closing them, especially because you're kind of in this like stone, like low ceiling world. That's kind of a cool environment to experiment with, those types of room sounds. But overall, I really like this one. Good job.
Thank you.
Yes.
And yes, I did notice that, that it was in mono after I submitted it. So I was like, but yeah.
Happens, no worries.
So in regards to what Lisa said about the voice processing, from that, you should learn that we also do all the cheap tricks. So do as we say, not as we do, okay? No, I think the processing of the voice is pretty nice, but I, as much as it's crisp and clear and very much as it is, I'm still getting the vibe that this is not a thought. I get the vibe that it's someone else talking to me, whereas it's not the main character's own voice. Because of the processing, it sounds like it's a ghost. It's someone else, rather if it was in my own head. That's just an opinion. It doesn't have to change. But I agree with Lisa that the subtle footsteps are nice because, as you may have noticed, some of the problems that we had in some of the previous projects is that if the footsteps become extremely loud, then a lot of variation is needed. The clearer they are, the more variation is needed to not make them monotonous. And that is solved by keeping them as subtle as this, like keeping everything low key, which is really nice. Also, the material change when walking around and so on. I thought I heard the reverb changing depending on rooms. Is that correct? Yeah, but when, as Lisa mentioned, with the door that you're opening, I didn't notice the reverb in that way. I didn't feel that it was missing there, but the door sound is probably a couple of seconds long, and when you play it, you had already moved like, I don't know, a couple of meters away from the actual door. So one thing would be to consider, that's not only with doors, but that's with a lot of sounds, is that they need to be way shorter than you would normally think that it should be, like a door and so on. Maybe it works in this case because there's like one door, but if you were working on a project where you had 20 doors and you opened a lot of those, then having a 3-second door sound will make the game clogged with stuff after you already moved on from the door. But I really think that the mixing is great. The way that works with the subtle footsteps, the music, the idea that you really get the vibe that the music isn't there. The music is coming from somewhere you cannot tell. It's not like either processed or placed somewhere in the world, but it's clearly not 2D, just something playing. It's the understanding of that this is coming from either another room or it's a ghost world or similar really comes through very well. Yeah, I think when picking up the keys, there is sort of like an achievement sound to that. And this is just an aesthetic comment. I would have preferred if it really was the sound of picking up a key, like a big piece of metal off something wooden or the floor. But that's an opinion and that's not a critique point. So I can't go further than that. But I think this is a job well done. Lisa nods.
Thank you so much. That means a lot, really. And yes, I get what you mean with. I wanted like a very long sound, like door sound, only because I wanted like that creaking. But then I realized about what you said, and there's actually more doors, but because of the video, like it had to be 3 minutes, and you can't see everything, but there are more doors. So you can tell like with time that's happening. So I am aware of that.
Yeah, but with the door, that's just a transition sequence. When you click the door, it fades to black and you go into this new world. I noticed that the sound of the door plays as the new world starts. If you could trigger it on when you actually click the door, then you could have saved like half or a whole second. Then the door sound might actually fit. But because it starts so late, it sounds like when I'm thinking I'm closing the door, it sounds like I'm opening the door. If the door sound would play the second that I would hit, I don't know, E or whatever button to open the door, that might give you the time that you need to have this length of sample.
Yes.
But I like the door sound, and I like creaky doors a lot. And I thought it was very fitting, just too long or playing at the wrong moment, something like that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
It's fun, especially when you start working with animators too, and they give you I'm just going to use a door example, and they give you a door that opens in like a few frames, and you're like, okay. And then, I mean, I'm in a position now where I can work with the animators and say, hey, can you actually like increase this is maybe a note for the future of when you start working in game dev of like, don't be afraid as a sound designer to go back to the animators, the level designers, and be like, hey, can you actually change this to accommodate sound? Because that's often not something that we think is an option. we'll be like, oh, this is what the designers have given us. We have to work with what they've with their designs, but you don't, like, not necessarily. I mean, you can have that kind of dialogue of like, hey, this animation is actually really short. I would love to have this like long, creepy door. Can you just elongate that animation and give it time? And then maybe the sort of passing through it is that walk cycle becomes a little bit slower or something like that. So you can appreciate the sound that you've put in it instead of trying to make like a, 3-frame door opening sound. It's like, but yeah. I also like a creaky. My library is severely lacking in creaky doors. I don't know.
Oh, you want one? I have a giant one.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. Just some library swaps after.
For a project at one point, there was a store that was selling doors and windows to carpenters and so on around the corner. Amazing. And I asked, like, can I go see your exhibition? And they had like this entire basement just full of demo doors. And just walking around opening and closing doors. They thought I was mental, but I was trying to explain to them that I needed it. But I have a lot of creaky doors if you want some, Lisa.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, love some.
I had a question. Did they understand why you needed the door sounds?
Yeah, I tried to explain to them that I was building a modular procedurally generated system for Hitman so that it was possible to alter doorknobs and stuff like that in the way that would slam. And he was like, whatever Rocha wrote, man, just go to the exhibition. So that was fun.
Yeah, it sounds fun. We have 2 more minutes if there are any final thoughts.
That was like when I was at Edinburgh Uni and I took a bunch of recording equipment to Ireland. And then TSA was like, what the hell is all this stuff? Like, what? Like, they opened up the bag and they like made me unpack everything. And they're like, what is all this equipment? Are these weapons? I'm like, no, they're microphones. I swear. It's fine. I had to like explain to them I was recording like ambiences and animals and stuff. And they were like, okay, whatever.
Or I have this microphone, by the way, at the Krakow airport, security guy taking it out of the box and just like, what is this? Insert your best Polish accent. What is this? And like, microphone, whatever. Like,
yeah. Airports can be fun for audio people.
Also, if you're having one of those shoulder bags with a recorder on your on your belly with cables, with you have micro ports and maybe a boom mic and stuff, and you have cables all over the place. Like, don't go in the subway during heavy traffic when there's a lot of people and stand there with something on your belly that looks like a giant bomb with cables coming out of it. Try to explain to people, it's just a recorder. I had the police pull me over at one point after the subway, be like, what am I doing in the metro? What is this thing you're carrying? It's like, it's cables and microphones. It's for a school project. I'm sorry. Like, just don't do it.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Maria, for your submission. And now we can move on to the next submission, which is called Dream by Lin Li. Awesome. Thanks for your submission, Lin. Now we'll bring Lin and our panelist into the spotlight. And maybe we can start with Bjorn and talk about the work.
Yeah. I like this for the vibe. There isn't much more to it than this, but I understand that there's quite a lot of work going into making sure that everything plays in harmony and everything fits together. I really think that the concept and the way the entire audio, the drones, the several layers of drones, and all the beep sounds and so on, in combination works really well. I totally respect the amount of work that must have gone into making sure that everything is kind of like in the same key, or at least fits to some degree, that this becomes an harmonious piece. I really enjoy the concept of it. I don't, not in a negative way, but I don't necessarily want to look at the game. I just want to listen to the sound, because I find it very soothing and very comforting just to listen to the whole world take shape. Yeah, I think it was very comforting and a very, very nice aesthetic setup and way of dealing with it.
Awesome. And now if we can hear from you, Lisa.
This is like right up my alley. I love this kind of projects. I love making these kinds of things, playing these kinds of games on my phone, and like listening to this type of music. So I love this one. So it might seem like I'm being like, I have a lot of feedback, but it's because I think the idea is like just super cool. I think this is a really great way of thinking about like an interactive sound environment. It's kind of unusual from the other ones, and it's like more about kind of what you can do with music in a small space and with like various objects. And I think it's wise to make a very, very simple environment so that you can focus on the sounds, especially for this type of project. So you don't get caught up too much in like the details of the visuals, which can add or detract from the way people perceive your project. I love the ball shooting sound. It was really satisfying. So that's good that you thought about making that like a really nice sound, because you hear it a lot, obviously. Unfortunately, I don't know, maybe this is a Zoom thing, but it was also a mono mix. And I was like really excited to hear about how the little spatial sounds would interact all over the room. But since it was mono, I didn't hear any of that. So I think that any of like mixed concerns we may have noticed could have been maybe helped by it being in stereo. I like that you thought about the whole frequency spectrum and how each sound can like stand alone from the others. Like it was very clear which interaction was creating which sound. I think some things you could consider, like how does it evolve over time? Like what kind of almost universal effects could you add to it? Like maybe there's like a big button in the corner that you press it and everything changes. Maybe like there's a blanket sort of effect that could like be put over the whole thing. Or maybe as you progress to like a doorway or something, like there's a universal change that happens or it evolves. Like I almost kind of wanted to have like a narrative structure in a way where there's like a beginning and a middle and an end kind of. You don't necessarily have to. This is just like a thought. Another thing I noticed was that, and this could be a video export thing too, but there was a noticeable delay between like the ball hitting a cube, like an impact, and then actually hearing the sound. So that could be like maybe an optimization issue or something maybe to do with the video. But I think, yeah, it was really nice how everything sounded really harmonious. It felt like a kind of musical piece that could stand alone. I would love to hear it in stereo or with the spatial effects. And I also really appreciate that you put a fade on the end of your video. And sometimes when I'm giving like feedback to students, I mention a lot of things about like the way people have edited their portfolios, because when you're making a portfolio, like you're making a film, you're making a short film, and you have to think about the mix of that film as a product on its own. So a lot of times when I'm looking at students' portfolios or reels, there'll be like no fades between projects. They'll like jump from one to the next. There's sometimes like mixed issues between projects. There's no fades. And that actually really does contribute to like the person's perception of your reel and your project. So it's nice that you thought about the kind of fading and like the experience of the video as well as the game. So I think getting that that stereo stuff sorted would be excellent. But well done, I loved it.
Thank you so much. This one is actually the part of the whole game piece. It's just a secret room part, and it's actually have another stuff with some more visual stuff. This one is actually from I wanted to build this room to become a random container, like a random sequencer, some stuff like that. And I use that boards because that boards can floating everywhere. It's totally randomly, so it will be punch walls and punch box, and they punch the ball punch box and the box punch walls. It will sound differently. I thought about that about the layers, and I think I will go further on my final project. It will be like that one, and yeah. So thank you for all of the advice, and I appreciate you like it.
I think one thing you've done really well is just preventing it from becoming super chaotic. And I'm curious like how you did that, because, you know, it's very easy for these kind of things, especially when you have a sound for each interaction, for it to become like overwhelming and you can't really distinguish the sounds from each other. But it felt very like controlled, and you know, the mix was really good. Like it felt like you controlled the chaos a little bit, which is good.
I use the 6 basement sound. I should say it's polymorphic.
Yeah, a limit. You had a voice limit. Yeah.
Yeah, because if I had another like too much polymorphic, it will be too messed up. Like it sounds like just sound everywhere. It's not like I'm shapeless. So yeah, I set a bunch of limits about that, and the cube, the delay. It's actually because the trigger is bigger than the actual cube, so I want to make that shape too, but I still want to the trigger, so it will be sound a little bit delay, and it's kind of bugs, and I realized it, and I don't know how to figure it out, because when I smaller that trigger, the boss probably won't like trigger the actual sound, so I have to keep it bigger, and that it's Unity problem. I spent a lot of time with the different triggers. Yeah, I didn't fix it.
It's a minor thing, I think, in the end. Like I wouldn't lose sleep over it, because the experience definitely works. But yeah, I know I don't miss those Unity bugs. They're always like a pain to think about.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would love to see where you get to it in the end and how the final project looks, because it was really cool.
Oh, thank you. It's like a circle, so you can see on the top we have a portal. So actually, I set like 4 or 5 pairs portal, so you can go through one rooms to another space and another space, another space. There's all some different, and some kind of the space has environmental stuff like wind, bird stuff. They're all my dreams, because my thoughts on that dreams is like, when you own a dream, you probably have on one space, but you will be like suddenly transfer another space. So I use the portals. So yeah, that's the whole idea.
Cool. Good luck. I'm sure you'll do really well.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your submission, Lin, and thank you to Bjorn and Lisa for their feedback. The next and the final submission we have is from one of the organizers of the festival. That's Parasol, and the project is called Finding Ursula, and we will listen to it now.
our great reach. Not a mermaid and a human. Our great reach.
Awesome. Thanks for your submission, Parasol. And now we will bring the panelists and Parasol to the spotlight. And maybe we can start with you, Lisa.
Sure. So yeah, really nice world building. Again, felt like you really cared about the sounds and the environment and the kind of fantasy around it. So I really liked the UI, the sounds that you chose for the UI and for the collectibles. Very shimmery, a little bit loud in the mix. So I found myself kind of like riding the volume a little bit as I was listening. Yeah, I love the music in the second world. That was really cool. And I also really appreciate when music is delayed, because it kind of like is more satisfying when you have silent bits beforehand. And so when you enter that second world, it feels so much more satisfying than to hear the music. And yeah, I'm curious to see if you compose that music yourself or if you found it. But either way, it works really well. I think having different voiceover spoken than written can be confusing. So when you're clicking to talk to a character and they say something different than what's typing, that kind of can be a little bit confusing. So I think what the way you treated that first red character in the second world was really smart, where it was just kind of like a grunt, like Zelda style, like just like a sound. And then you get like the sense of that character's personality without them actually saying anything. And then in games, a thing that we do sometimes to avoid localizing is to make grunts and not words, because as soon as you put words in a game, you have to localize, and then that's like expensive. But you don't have to think about that, obviously. I did think that the typing sound didn't fit the kind of sparkly, shiny universe of the rest of the sounds. So I'm curious to see what kind of like dialogue scrolling sound you could maybe come up with that would fit that universe a little bit better. And then I missed a bit of like reverb, and I think especially with this colorful underwater world, you can get really crazy with the reverb, and I think with like that dial, the gears that were clicking, I think it could use a bit of that sort of reverb or spatial sound design. But yeah, really nice. Well done.
Thank you. Yes, the music is composed by me. And
awesome.
Yeah, thank you. And also, like the character things, like I really tried to want the players to interact with them, but I found it's really hard for me. And also, you mentioned the typing sound. Yes, I think so. I think I need more progress of that, and also, it's quite difficult for me to like track the speed of the typing, like with the sound. But yeah, yes. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
I think like you don't always need to put a sound for dialogue scrolling. I think there's like whenever sound designers always have this like desire we see something moving, so we have to put a sound on it. But I think if you have a sound for like clicking next, like if there's a sound for when you switch to the next bit of dialogue, that can sometimes just be enough, like say you have the character kind of greeting you with like an sound, and then when you press X or whatever to move to the next bit of dialogue, that can have like a nice kind of crystally sound, and you don't necessarily need one for the actual dialogue scrolling. You could experiment with that at least and see if it works a little bit better. Yeah.
And about the reverb, I was trying to fit the characters and the diamond sound effect to fit in this environment. But when I was doing that, when I was mixing, I found it's quite hard for me to add much reverb to this environment, because it make the whole environment sound very mud. So I was wondering if you guys have any suggestions of that.
Yeah, EQ your reverb. I usually just like roll off all the low end of my. I mean, depending, of course, on the environment. If it's like a dark cave kind of, you have to experiment. But a lot of the time, I just EQ my reverbs a lot. I like take out 200 hertz. Not you don't have to be as dramatic as I sometimes am, but I usually like cut everything below 100 and then do like a notch at 200 or 300 depending, and just experimenting with that. And I find that like plate reverbs tend to sound a little bit more, not like you could, you don't have to use like a room or an IR. You can use like a plate, which is like a little bit more shimmery sounding and tends to have kind of a bit more interesting stuff in the higher end too. But yeah, definitely EQ your reverbs. That would be a helpful one for muddiness.
Thank you.
I think now that you don't have footsteps, I think it's the right place to say that your swimming sounds needs more variation. It's not bad at all, the one or two couple of variations that there is, but I really miss that. What if I'm swimming a little faster or a little slower? It could also be longer, like tiny bubbles coming around, to make it feel like it's actually me swimming, because or the character swimming, since it's first person. That would be probably where I would put an effort in to make it like not realistic, but make the aesthetics not shine through as something that would break my immersion. But apart from that, I like the world, and I do agree with Lisa that you don't necessarily need a typing sound, but from a technical perspective, think that the typing sound is really well done. I mean, it does click per not per letter, but something similar, and it does stop whenever you skip to the next and so on, meaning that the implementation is quite well done in regards to the text. But as mentioned before, that when you have a universe, you have established this underwater universe with diamond sounds and weird water sounds and so on. Then when you have this super dry analog typing sound, maybe it should have been water bubbles, or maybe it should have been something else. Like, instead of taking it away, it could have been like just tiny things that would fit into that universe. And I agree that you cannot have a character that says something else than the text says, because either you communicate through voices or with text, because you can't have both. Of course, you can have both if it's two separate things, but in this case, it felt like this character is talking to me, but he's saying something completely different. But I think the dial thing, as Liz also mentioned, I would have made, okay, but that's also because I'm married to a compressor, pretty much, would say that it should have been much louder and clunkier and so on, so that whenever you would move it about, it would be like poof, 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 or something, to get the understanding that you're actually moving something with power, or that this is something that does something to the world, not just a tiny little moving thing. Else it could have been more cartoony. It feels like it was a little like, okay, why am I turning this thing for no reason? But I like the universe. Very colorful, but that's also fun. So yeah, it's well done, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. The thing is actually created by one of our students of the digital media in Edinburgh College of Art, and yes, and also you mentioned the footwork. The footsteps. I made it because I was thinking that this word is like not real reality, but it is not reality and not fantasy, but it's a combination. So I recorded some sound of of grass and the sand and the water. I just wanted to like show the tail of the mermaid, because this work is called Mermaid to find the Ursula. So I just try to show that the mermaid's tail, something like that. So yeah, it do needs more variation. That's true. Thanks for that. That's a good point. Thank you.
Awesome. So surprisingly, we've done well on time, and we still have 15 minutes left. So I think we can take one question from the audience, if that's okay with you.
Yeah,
with both of you. Awesome. Yeah, we'll just wait for one question from the audience, and in the meantime, as we are on the hot topic of footsteps, maybe we can continue geeking out about that. So yeah, like I realized that sample variation, then maybe some level of volume randomization, and then some pitch randomization are some of the go-to things. But like, do the two of you have any tips that you didn't mention before that you use like on a day-to-day practice? So for example, like if you're walking around and like you're walking around in a grassland, so how to make like more dynamic and have like a random splash and stuff like that makes the environment interesting.
I think good source is the most important thing. Like we can like get really granular with the variations in Wise or wherever you're working. But I think like the source is key. The source is the most important part. And forgive me if that sounds a bit obvious. But I think once you have a bunch of good source, it can be helpful to break things out into containers. So like if you have like one footstep as a container and that footstep has several different elements to it, like maybe it has kind of impact sound, and maybe it has like a grassy layer, or maybe it has a few different elements that you can then break out and then randomize between each like actual event of the footstep, then that then multiplies your possibilities of randomizing things by a lot. And I'm sure that's probably one that you all know of and stuff too. But thinking about also like the perspective of the character, like a lot of the time the footstep sounds like, I think Bjorn mentioned this in a project when we were feedbacking, but a lot of the times it might be just way too close. Like the mic is like right up against the shoe, and like your player might not actually hear it like that. So thinking about how the sound would travel between the foot and like your head, and then also like what's the player wearing, because the way they move is also like a huge factor. Like do they have any accessories that are important that would affect the way that their foot falls and things like that. I think the more details you can add while not over budgeting your the room you have in terms of optimization, like the better, basically, the more realistic and the more believable it will sound.
Right. Yeah, that's a really cool point. I was recently listening to a podcast where they were talking to the audio director for Returnal, and they were talking about the fact that they had the footstep literally coming from down there, and just the source being down there and it being spatialized in a way made like it sound like interesting, like spatially. Yeah, that's something I have to check out. So yeah, thanks. That's a great point.
Listen to games that you love. That's why just blatantly copy what they're doing. That's what all good art is made.
Yeah, thank you. Bjorn, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, because I've worked with a lot of footsteps for some really weird projects, and I'm working on one right now. The way that we have done it there is I have mixed everything together, but then have like 40 variations for each step and each material. My build engineer hates me for taking up so much memory and size, but that's one way of doing it. If you have that amount of space, then you can hard code it so that it sounds great. But I have previously been a great fan of splitting it up into layers, as Lisa mentioned, like of a base layer of shoe, and then maybe shoe material, ground material, 2 types of sweeteners. If you just have 5 variations of each, that gives you 3,125, something like that. Math is bad, but that gives you 3,000 something variations. Maybe it shouldn't be that strict to 5 variations of each. Maybe the base foot can have 10 variations and the others can have 5 or similar, so that it's never the same. Like the primary layer can have more variations, but in that way you can split up sounds so that variation becomes a thing of the past. Well, no, repetition becomes a thing of the past. If you're using Wise or other types of middleware, not directly in Engine, because that makes it a little harder, but especially if you're using Wise, if you just have 5 footsteps, you can easily split it up into, if you cut all of them in half, so that it randomizes heel versus toe, then all of a sudden you have 25 variations rather than 5. And that uses the same amount of assets. It's tiny little changes, but also if you then randomize pitch, but also individually on heel and toe, you can sort of like get thousands of variations out of very, very, very little space and with very little effort. I understand that this might seem like common sense to some, but also from witnessing a bunch of projects, that this is not necessarily common sense to some, that this would be a way to solve a problem. But from experience, it's a super fast way of doing it. It's merely a question of knowing the possibilities of your middleware or engine or whatever you're working in. Like, how would you solve a certain problem? And I'm also in a long-term relationship with Wise, so I'm quite familiar with how to get variations out of nothing. Like the current project we're working on, where we have like 40 or 20 or 30 variations per step, but then we also have that's also because it's super detailed, but we have numerous values coming in. So I have versions of if the ground is wet, if the ground is dry, if it's a little bit wet, and so on, so that it's never the same thing that plays, regardless if you're walking. And I don't know if there's made a study of how often something can be repeated, but if you have 30 variations and you limit it to never play the past 21s, your brain will most likely never understand when the repetition took place, because there is no pattern. And the key word is pattern. You can't have a pattern. Even if you have 40 variations of a footstep, if they all are kind of similar, click, but if one of them just says clonk, you will be able to hear that one sound over and over again, as maybe not as a pattern, but as a random pattern, and it'll break the immersive feeling of that this is a continuous stream of footsteps. And it's practice and listening. And even if you're taking a walk yourself outside, just listen to how your footsteps actually sounds, because they are almost identical all the time if you walk on the same surface in the same manner. But they're not. They're close, but not.
Yeah.
And the more layers you have too, like the less you actually have to randomize characteristics within each layer. So like I think a big one that we hear is obviously like pitch variation is very obvious when it's overdone. And you hear like one deep one and one really high one, and it feels like really obvious. But if you randomize volume, for example, a little bit within each of these characteristics, and then pitch just a tiny bit, and you have all these layers, like then the possibilities are endless. Like the way we walk, the reason you can get away with this is because like we sometimes will just like step on like a slightly grassier patch of the lawn at one point, and then the sweetener will be a little bit louder. And like, so I think that you can get away with less randomizing the more layers that you have. And then it won't feel as obvious that you're using those tricks, I think.
Yeah, but also if you want to go into that sort of detail in regards to volume and pitching, if you're using Wise, like randomizing the high pass just a tiny bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Randomizing certain values and so on. And you can literally, I think that would be a nice experiment, have one sample and then only variations of stuff. I'm sure you can get way further than you think with just one sample.
Try using pitch as like a last resort, like see what you can get away with the other kind of parameters that you have at your disposal.
Yeah.
And save pitch as like the kind of last one. Yeah. I did hear that there is now like some AI tech being developed for adding variations for sounds that goes beyond like the kind of tools that we normally use. And I don't know much more about it, but I've heard some rumors going around. So I'm very curious to see.
They're taking our jobs.
Yeah.
We need to find who these people are and hunt them down.
No, I think audio is safe. Like, as a kind of general philosophical like thought, I don't think we're gonna be surpassed by AI anytime soon. I think there are other disciplines in the world that are a little bit more at risk, but I don't think we have to worry about anything.
No, I agree.
Yeah. And that's why I think it's really exciting. It's like this intersection of creative and technical work. And with both of y'all's work, like, yeah, I know like the two of you are technically very proficient and at the same time sonically like there as well, interested in like the creative side as well. And yeah, it's very exciting. And I guess that's a hard thing to achieve with AI, to be creative. So yeah, that's good to hear. So we have about 5 minutes left. I'd kept this time to share the stage and pass on the microphone to you if you guys have any projects you want to share about, anything that you've been working on that you want to share, any links or anything like that, then you can do that now.
Don't know what I can even talk about on my current project. Yeah. But I think Morph, as Lisa mentioned, is a great tool. There's a bunch of great tools that are great that should be shared around. There is numerous tools that are free that does similar, maybe not the same, but similar. I would suggest just simply Googling free glitch VSTs, and you can get really far with, especially if you want to do weird stuff. But yeah, find some plugins that you really enjoy and then work with only those. Don't buy a new one every week, and it won't save the world if you get new ones or anything like that. It's like buying new synthesizers won't make you happier, but it'll make you sleep better. So
yeah, for sure. And Lisa, I see you shared a link right now, but if there is anything else I would like to share.
I think there's a really nice sort of trend of like people, like individuals creating VSTs for really cheap with kind of minimum. I feel like Valhalla Verb kind of started this in a way of being like, all right, we no longer want to like visually emulate gear from like old gear. We're going to like just make everything clean and like straight to the point. So there's this guy who makes these really awesome granular and spectral processing plugins that are like super unique, and they're really, really affordable. Some of them are free, or like you can try them for free. And like very, very cool stuff. And there's a few other people, like I think he's kind of the first one that comes to mind, but like, let me see if I have like a little like list here. There's a few other plugin manufacturers that are just mostly individuals that are creating, and there are people making cool synths these days too. See if I can like, there's a really cool kind of, yeah, what's his name again? I have to think. I might have to like update you later about it.
I can send out an email with the tools that you share.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Definitely experiment with kind of like unusual interfaces with plugins. Like, don't feel like you have to go for something that's traditionally designed so that you understand it. Like, it's okay to kind of just have a play with something that's got an unusual interface, and then see how it kind of trying to figure out how it works in reverse.
Right. Yeah. That's a very good point.
And nobody will judge you what you used if it sounds good.
Yes.
That's the golden rule.
No, but we had a guy come into the office and he wanted to use Fruity Loops and Audacity, and I was literally dying when he said it. But the sounds he'd made with that was great, and I sort of like bumped my own head for being such a gear snob over what he said. But those are tools that I would not consider ideal for sound design, but that didn't matter because he did cool stuff with it. So don't be afraid to use if you feel comfortable using something. Like I'm never shifting away from Cubase because I'm a friend of Cubase and I'm like really enjoy using it. I know a bunch of people who swears to Reaper and so on. It doesn't matter. Like my end product doesn't show what I made it with, unless of course I write it in the metadata or something. So
I rate FL Studio. They're cool. They were like my first DAW, I think, before, or maybe Reason.
Same. My first techno tracks back in the 90s was made in Fruity Loops. So.
But also, as a note on that, I was bullied severely by my audio team when I was the only person left using Pro Tools. And like the IT department even bullied. They were like, "Oh, really? We have to buy you Pro Tools? You're such a grandma." And eventually I got bullied so hard that I switched to Reaper, and now because like everyone and all the rest of my team uses Reaper, and as a studio, that's like so. But yeah, don't don't let people bully you about what DAW you use. Or you'll become like me.
Just install Reaper and install the Pro Tools template so it looks like Pro Tools.
I've done. There's a guy called I forget his name, but there's a website, Pro Tools 2 Reaper. It's a set of scripts you can buy for $30 or pounds or whatever, and it just basically makes Reaper look like Pro Tools. And that's what I've done. So
cool. That's a very good hack for migration from one DAW to another.
Yes, I don't have time. Like I'm too busy. I can't learn a new DAW without like.
Yeah, that's understandable. Now, sadly, we've reached the end of the stream. I would like to thank the two of you for joining us today and sharing your awesome feedback and sharing the awesome tips and all the links. And I would also like to thank University of Edinburgh and the Student Experience Grant for making this event possible. And finally, I would like to thank all the people who submitted their work. I know it's hard to put yourself in the spotlight and get your work reviewed while everyone is there. And it takes a lot of courage. So thanks a lot for your submissions, and thanks a lot for all the participants and for all the audience members. Awesome. Thank you so much, Bjorn and Lisa.
Thank you.
Hope to catch you guys sometime soon.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Bye-bye. Have a great evening.
Bye.
Bye.